The Zodiac Killer was an unidentified killer that taunted North Carolina between 1968 and 1969. Hi, it's Tia, and today we're going to be discussing the Zodiac Killer case. Before we get in, I would just like to preface that this is just research that I've conducted to create a video and spread information, and in no way do I mean to offend nor disrespect anybody. Now let's get on to the case. Betty Lou Jensen, who was 16 years old at this time, and David Arthur Faraday, who was 17 at this time, decided to go on a first date. They originally went to the high school Christmas concert that was 3 blocks away from Betty Lou's house, or 10 to 20 minutes away, so it really wasn't that far at all. It was nearby in the area. And David was driving his mother's Rambler. I'll insert a picture of that somewhere. They left this Christmas concert at around 10 p.m. and then started their 15-minute journey to Lake Herman Road. They turned onto the gravel turnout, which was a popular place for couples to go when they wanted privacy, and they drove down this road and then parked the Rambler. And it wasn't until approximately 11:20 p.m. that their bodies were found. Their bodies were found on this gravel turnout by a woman who lived nearby in the area. And this woman immediately went to get help, and she ran into Captain David Pitter, who recalled arriving at the scene at around 11:28 p.m. The Solano County Sheriff's Department had no leads in the case, and it wasn't until 1976 that Robert Graysmith used existing forensic evidence to speculate what had happened. It is believed that a car pulled into the lovers' lane shortly before 11 p.m. and then parked next to the couple. The person in this car then got out and walked over to the couple's car and ordered them both to get out, possibly. And then he fired off 2 warning shots, and we know this because it hit the car. The back right rear mirror was completely shattered. Betty Lou got out first, and then David Arthur Faraday did. But as David was halfway getting out of the car, the attacker shot him in the head, just below his left ear, and that caused a fatal brain injury. Betty either tried to flee or was ordered to run by this killer. Either way, she was shot 5 times in the back while she was running away, and she was found 20 feet away from the car. Attacker then left the scene, and then went to the suspect. Oh my god, stop. Sorry about that. 6 months later, just prior to midnight on July 4th, 1969, Darlene Ferrin, who was 22 at the time, and Michael Mageau, who was 19 years old at the time, drove into Blue Rock Springs Park.
Vallejo or Vallejo.
That doesn't help, it gave me 2 options. I'm gonna say Vallejo. Sounds nicer. The couple drove into Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo and parked their car. This spot is 4 miles away from where Betty Lou Jensen and David Arthur Faraday were murdered. While the couple was sitting in Darlene's car, another car pulled into the park, stopped next to them before immediately driving away, and it was around 10 minutes later that the car came back into the park and stopped directly behind the couple. The driver then got out of his car and approached the passenger side of Darlene's car, which was where Michael Mageau was sitting. The stranger shined a flashlight into their eyes and then shot a gun 5 times. It's widely believed that the attacker targeted Michael, but the autopsy reports suggest otherwise. Darlene had 4 entry and exit wounds on her arm. 2 bullets entered and exited her right arm before entering and exiting her left arm. It suggested that her hands were on the steering wheel as they were being shot at. If the attacker targeted Michael first, then Darlene's initial reaction would not have been to put her hands on the steering wheel and turn the key in the ignition. Instead, she would have turned away from the gunfire. After the initial 2 shots, the attacker turned his attention to Michael, who was shot in the neck and then the shoulder. Michael then got himself into the back of the car as an attempt to try and escape. Both of his gunshot wounds were exit wounds, so they passed through Michael and then hit Darlene in her torso. And these were the only 2 bullets found in Darlene in her autopsy, because the bullets had lost momentum after going through Michael and then didn't pass through Darlene completely. After Michael rushed the back of the car, the attacker fired a 5th shot and hit Darlene in her torso again. This was another exit wound. This was when the attacker walked away from the car for a brief moment, and then he returned at the passenger side again, extended his arm into the car and fired 2 more shots at Michael Mageau. Michael was hit in his thigh and his hip. The attacker then turned his attention to Darlene again and fired his last 2 shots. Both of these hit her in the torso. Darlene had now suffered 9 entry wounds and only 7 exit wounds. Darlene Ferrin was tragically pronounced dead at the hospital, and Michael Mageau miraculously survived the attack despite being shot multiple times. That lie is really pissing me off. Sorry, I don't care, it's good enough. On July 5th, 1969 at 12:40 a.m, so just 40 minutes after the attack, the I forgot how I pronounced it.
Vallejo or Vallejo.
On July 5th, 1969 at 12:40 a.m, so just 40 minutes after the attack, the Vallejo Police Department received a phone call from a man who claimed responsibility for this attack, and he also claimed responsibility for the 2 murders that occurred 6 months prior, the murders of Betty Lou Jensen and David Arthur Faraday. The police obviously traced this call, and it led back to a phone booth at a police station. No, led back to a phone booth at a gas station a few blocks away from the police station. Michael Mageau was able to describe this attacker as between 26 to 30 years old with light brown curly hair, around 200 pounds and around 5'8". On August 1st, 1969, 3 letters were sent out to newspaper outlets. These were Vallejo Times Herald, San Francisco Chronicles, and the San Francisco Examiner. These letters were all basically identical, and they all said that the person writing them was responsible for these 2 shootings. These letters all each contained a third of a cryptogram that the writer said contained his identity if it was solved. The killer demanded that these letters be printed front page, or he would, quote, cruise around all weekend killing lone people in the night, then move on to kill again and again until I end up with over a dozen people, end quote. The Chronicle published this letter on page 4 alongside a quote from Chief Jack E. Stilt saying, quote, we're not satisfied that the letter was written by the murderer, end quote. He then further requested that the writer send out another letter that contains more facts about his identity. On August 7th, 1969, San Francisco Examiner received a second letter with the words, quote, Dear editor, this is the Zodiac speaking, end quote. Okay, so that is it for part 1. Obviously I forgot to film an outro, so you get this. This is probably going to be a 3-part series, but it also might be a 2-part series. I'm not very sure yet. But yeah, I'll see you next time.